Hello everyone, it is Matt here from Scoop in Response. Today I wanted to go over a deck that I've put together using one of the new C21 commanders, Adrix and Nev Twincasters. One of the things that I noticed when this was spoilt, there isn't actually any real token Simic commanders, which was actually quite surprising to me given how many Selesnya commanders we have that are token themed, and just I guess general green spells that are great with tokens. So this was actually pretty fun for me to put together. The deck is entirely designed to go wide. We're not going to be doing much of the way of pumping. We're just going to be creating crazy amounts of tokens with pretty much every effect that we can see. So we'll go over the commander first and foremost. Adrix and Nev Twincasters. They are 2 green and a blue for Ward 2, which is basically just like a soft hexproof. So you've got to pay 2 to target the creature, or it will be countered. So yeah, that's pretty cool. You know, sort of pseudo hexproof for most of the time. It just means that they can't, 1 mana path you or fatal push or something like that. So very, very cool to see. I think that having just straight up hexproof on a commander like this would probably be a bit too broken, so it's kind of nice to have just a little bit of protection. But the main point is, if 1 or more tokens would be created under your control, twice that many of those tokens are created instead. So it's pretty awesome. It's not 2 instead of 1, it's double. So what that means is, as you create more and more copies of Adrix and Nev, or if you've got additional token doublers, they start to stack and stack and stack multiplicatively instead of just 1, 2, 3. So really awesome stuff that you can do. We'll start with Planeswalkers. So first Planeswalker, we've got Jace Mirror Mage. I really just like this because it does create a token copy of Jace if you kick it for 2. So you pay 5 mana and you can get 1 or 2 or 5 copies of Jace Mirror Mage as it enters the battlefield. And on its own, they're not particularly great as far as Planeswalkers go, but when you pair it with Kasmina Enigma Sage, which is the next Planeswalker, that's another recently spoiled card as well. Each other Planeswalker you control has the loyalty abilities of Kasmina Enigma Sage, so +2 to scry 1, you get to create tokens, and then you get to search your library for instant or sorcery cards that share the colors with this Planeswalker, so you can go and get blue from the Jace or blue-green from the Kasmina. Coming up next, we've got the Oko Thief of Crowns. Great card. Creates food tokens though, so you can actually start to really ramp up those food tokens quite quickly. You tick up once, get yourself 2 food or 6 life at a later point. We know that Oko's broken, so we don't really need to dwell on that too much. Garruk Wildspeaker, pseudo ramp, untapping 2 lands is absolutely awesome. We've got a few things that we can untap. We've got a few things that we can generate extra mana with for lands as well, which is pretty cool. So we've got things like Wild Growth and Utopia Sprawl, so we can essentially get more than just 2 in a lot of instances. We've got a token generator, so that's obviously great in this deck. Put a 3/3 green beast token creature onto the battlefield, and then we've got an overrun effect as well. Freyalise, we create token Llanowar Elves, which is awesome. It's got artifact and enchantment destruction, as well as drawing cards, so a great card. And then we've got another Garruk Primal Hunter, upticks for this time for more tokens, draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures you control, and creating a 6/6 green worm creature token for each land you control. So if you get a chance to go off with that, it's pretty damn awesome. Just the number of tokens that you'll be able to create of the 6/6s. For creatures, we've got Elvish Mystic, Fyndhorn Elves, Llanowar Elves, just your standard 1-drop accelerators. A bit spicy, we've got Gilded Goose, so when it ETBs, you create a food token, so you're nowhere near as sad about this coming in and ETBing compared to your Fyndhorn Elvish or your Llanowar Elves later on, because obviously Adrix will increase the number of food tokens you get, so a bit of extra value, which is kind of cool. Eternal Witness is just a great staple in green, getting cards back from your graveyard. A lot of reasons that we want to be doing this, particularly with some weird loops that we can demonstrate with a few of the other cards in the deck. We've got Hull Breacher, creates treasure tokens. Probably if it wasn't just creating the treasure tokens, it would just be a little bit out of place. But the fact that it actually does generate those tokens, it means that you can, really take advantage of, triple or double or 5 times the tokens in some instances for treasure. We don't run any wheels, so there's no time twisters, or there's no windfalls or anything like that, but you're more than welcome to add those to the deck. I think it would be totally fine to do. You've got Nadir Kraken. Whenever you draw a card, you may pay 1. If you do, put a +1/+1 counter on Nadir Kraken and create a blue tentacle creature token. Now, when we have some of our enchantments in play, we can actually draw our deck with this card, because we've got things like Cryptolitherite and Earthcraft that are going to let us actually tap for surplus mana each time that happens. We've got Scoot Swarm, standard all-star at the moment. One of the reasons they had to change Arena, purely because there's too many tokens being generated by this guy. Absolutely insane, because it starts to exponentially increase. You're going to have a calculator out to work out the number of tokens you're going to need with this guy. We've got Erastor of the Endless Web. This is, I guess, a bit of a quieter card. It didn't see much play in standard. I think it was overshadowed by everything else that came out in the set. I think the main thing with this guy is, though, that these 1/2 green spider creature tokens with reach, it's absolutely awesome. If you're playing against fairies or any kind of flyers, these things just stop everything dead in their tracks. It's just absolutely insane how quickly these will ramp up. Bit of a spicy one, Golden Guardian. It's a 4-drop defender. 2, Golden Guardian fights another target creature you control. When Golden Guardian dies this turn, return it to the battlefield transformed under your control. So one of the cool things about this guy is, we'll just flip him now, is he becomes a land, and he becomes a token generating land. He also becomes a land that taps for 2 mana. All of these things are pretty damn good. So it's a bit difficult to actually activate him and get him to become a land. You always need to activate him if you want him to become a land when he's destroyed. But one of the things that this deck is incredibly weak against is board wipes. So you effectively have to start over once you get board wiped. So we have included something, things like Heroic Intervention to help, but essentially this is kind of your pseudo board wipe defense, because you can actually get a bit of value off of this by making a token generating land that taps for 2 if it is wiped. We've got Narumeha, Master Wizard. Now this card goes infinite with another card that you may see in this particular deck, which is Saheeli's Artistry. Essentially, he goes onto the stack, you create a copy of a target spell, instant or sorcery that you control, and you choose new targets for the copies. So you use Saheeli's Artistry to create copies of the Narumeha once it's ETB'd, but with your commander, you can actually be creating more than 1 copy, so you can start to incrementally increase the number of tokens that you can generate for each of these times that you resolve this particular loop. We've got another great one, Orvar the Allform, another sort of pseudo-storm commander. He's a changeling. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, if it targets 1 or more permanents you control, create a token that's a copy of one of those permanents. Now the cool thing about this is it's any permanent, so any instant sorcery that's targeting a permanent you control, you can create token copies. So you can do this, you can use this guy to create infinite Mystic Sanctuaries and put your spells back on top of your library over and over and over again. You can use it to basically just create copies of anything that you might want to. It's absolutely insane how good this card is, particularly in this deck. And it also has, whenever a spell or an ability an opponent controls causes you to discard this card, you create a token that's a copy of the permanent. So not crazy relevant, but it can't hurt. Every now and again you might be up against a Togrid deck or something like that, and you've got an option to discard this, and you can actually get a bit of value, which would be much better than no value. We've got a pairing here with Sakashima of 1,000 Faces and Kodama of the East Tree. Now the pair of these are actually a pretty decent partner pairing for a commander deck in Simic themselves. I just find these cards to be absolutely great when it comes to this deck. Legend ruling means that we can be creating token copies of anything. We don't need to worry about if it's legendary or not. And Kodama of the East Tree means that whenever a token comes into play, we can put a land from our hand into play, which is just insane. Progenitor Mimic, so it reads, you may have Progenitor Mimic enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield except it gains at the beginning of your upkeep. If this creature isn't a token, create a token that's a copy of this creature. So insanely cool. It's an engine in itself and it'll be a threat. It's essentially a have to deal with type card, otherwise it'll just run away with the game if you're making 3 or 4 or 5 copies of each creature each turn. We've got Koma, Cosmos Serpent. Important thing to note, can't be countered, but also it's an each upkeep, not your upkeep. So one round the table you get 4 Serpent tokens, but if you've got doublers or triplers out, you can actually have 12 or 48 even tokens per turn if you've got enough of those doubling effects. And what's really cool is he can give himself indestructible, but he can also tap down target permanents by sacrificing serpents. So what you could potentially be looking at is if you have enough in terms of token generators, you can be creating a pseudo lock where you can tap down all of your opponent's lands in each of their untap and upkeep steps so that they don't actually have any land available, any mana available for their main phase. The last creature we've got is Desolator Twin, which is absolutely cool. It's 10 mana for a 10/10. When you cast Desolator Twin, put a 10/10 colorless Eldrazi creature token onto the battlefield. So I guess once you've got token doublers or triplers out, having a 30/30 or a 40/40 worth of power is pretty crazy even for the 10 mana. Something like this wouldn't be an auto include, but we've actually got a few, spicier enchantments that really help improve the likelihood that you can draw him at the right time. For sorceries, we have Full Flowering, which is XX and a green, populate X times, which is basically create a token copy of a creature token that you control. So it's got to be already a token. So it's 2 mana to create a copy past the first. So 3 mana, create a token copy, 5 mana, create 2 token copies. You can see where this is going. It's pretty insane as you pump mana into it, and you will be able to generate a lot of mana with this deck. We've got Gelatinous Genesis, XX and a green again, create X/X green creature tokens. So these guys, if you're paying 8 into X or something like that, even 6 into X, which would be 13 mana, which is quite a decent amount, you're going to have 100 power on board if you've got a doubler or a tripler. It's just absolutely insane how much power you can put out with these cards if you have your commander out. Farseek, it's just ramp, same with 3 visits. Cultivate, all of these are just absolutely great sorceries that you can use to ramp and to thin out your deck as well. Quasi-Duplicate is create a token that is a copy of a target creature you control, and it's got Jumpstart, so you can cast this from your graveyard by discarding a card in addition to paying the costs and you exile it. So you've actually got 2 hits with this one. So really good card. It sees a bit of play in, I guess, those weird sort of Izzet or the sort of blue-red X decks that try to one-shot you in historic or standard Neoform and whatnot. They use this kind of stuff too. I think it's a great card. It's pretty cheap for what it does, and the fact that you get 2 hits off of it is really good. Rite of Replication, I mean, your more seasoned Commander players are going to really know everything that there is about this particular card. So you create 5 copies of a creature if you kick it, so just absolutely insane once it's doubled or tripled up. Saheeli's Artistry, as we mentioned before, create a token that's a copy of target artifact. Create a token that is a copy of target creature, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. So you're doing all kinds of weird and wonderful things with this. It's just used with Neremeha or just to get some straight value off of something else like your Orvar, something like that. The top of the deck for sorceries, we have Clone Legion, and that reads, for each creature target player controls, put a token onto the battlefield that's a copy of that creature. So you can imagine what that's going to do with a double or a triple effect. Someone's looking like the big bad wolf of the table in the pod, and you just play this to get double, triple, 4 times, 10 times their actual army, and now you're the arch nemesis instantly. Absolutely cool card generally, but I think it's just absolutely awesome in this deck. Moving on to instants, we've got Chain of Vapor. Return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand, then that permanent controller may sacrifice a land. If that player does, he or she may copy this spell and choose a new target for that copy. So this is just a cheap bounce spell, but often you can find lines to do with Orvar by sacrificing your own islands, which you can create a whole bunch of token copies of anyway. So you can often find yourself, getting in a surplus loop if you're using this card plus a few other things to create token copies of lands for you to sacrifice. It's just absolutely super cool to do. I find it worked really well in the Orvar decks that I was playing. But in this deck, it's just a cool bit of tech that you can use for removal or to create, a bit of value. Pongify, just great removal in blue for 1. Sometimes you may want to target over the top of someone else's removal spell. So if someone wants to exile one of your permanents, you can cast this over the top of it to put it into your graveyard and then generate 3, 6, or 9 3/3s, which is very cool. Same thing applies to rapid hybridization. We've got Druid's Deliverance, which is a fog effect that gives you a populate as well. The fog's okay, but 2 mana to just populate is pretty cool. You can do some weird stuff once you've got Sakashima or Kadama out. There's lots of weird and wonderful ways that you can do stuff with this. Heroic Intervention just protects from board wipes a little bit. Crackling Counterpart. So I guess this is just another version of Quasi-Duplicate. Put a token onto the battlefield that's a copy of target creature you control. So yeah, very cool. It's also got flashback, so it's very similar to Quasi-Duplicate, but it's at instant speed, so that's pretty boss. Pondrix Command, newly spoilt card. It's like a mini cryptic command. Choose to return target creature or planeswalker to its owner's hand. Counter target artifact or enchantment spell. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature, or target player shuffles up to 3 target cards from their graveyard into their library. Very cool card. And then we've got Second Harvest for the last instant. For each token you control, put a token on the battlefield that is a copy of that permanent. So this can be a ritual effect in a lot of instances. If you start creating token copies of your lands, this can really quickly become a ritual. Moving on to artifacts. So we've got Mana Crypt for 0. We know all about that one. Skull Clamp for drawing cards when we're creating all of our little dudes. Sol Ring, Arcane Signet, Simic Signet. All of these are obvious ramp choices. We've got Mimic Vat. This works with tokens, so we can pay 3 mana a turn to exile, to create a token copy of an imprinted creature. Absolutely awesome rate for something like this. When you get to double it and triple it, this is, it's just insane. Esika's Chariot. I'm just really hot on this card generally at the moment. When it enters, you create 2 green cat tokens, and whenever it attacks, you create a token that's a copy of target token you control. So you can just use this to create more and more copies of different tokens that you have. Absolutely awesome. The last card, Helm of the Host. This one is pretty well the strongest card in your whole deck because of the way that it is read. If you create more and more copies of your commander, it exponentially creates more and more tokens of those tokens. So someone's done the math somewhere on Reddit, and I think it was something like turn 1 you create 2 tokens, turn 2 you create 9 tokens, and then after that it starts to get into the hundreds and the thousands of tokens that you're creating, which are copies of your commander. So absolutely insane. Enchantments. We've got Concordant Crossroads. This is not something that you want to just drop and leave on the field. This is essentially your win con after you've gone wide. So let's say you have a situation where you generate a whole bunch of creatures, but they obviously have summoning sickness. You would play this after that happens so that you can attack that turn, obviously, to give it haste. So you really only want to be playing with this if you've got a good chance of winning this turn. There are other reasons that you'd want to play it. For example, we can combine it with Cryptolith Rite to give ourselves a whole bunch of extra mana this turn. So if you've got 9 creatures on the field, you play this and then you play Cryptolith Rite, and all of them can tap for mana this turn, so you can make more and more creatures which also have haste that you can tap for mana. So yeah, it's pretty insane some of the things that you can do with this card. So if you, for instance, you wanted to cast you have your commander on the battlefield and you wanted to cast your Gelatinous Genesis, and you generate 5 tokens, or X is 5, and that would have been 11 mana, I believe. So you pay 11 mana. With Nev out, you are going to create 10 tokens, so it only costs you 1 mana to actually do that, because you can then tap those 10 tokens for the 10 mana that you've spent, and then you can look at doing that again. As you start to go up more and more, or if you have a tripler or anything like that, then you actually will turn it into a full ritual. We've got Mystic Remora, great card draw, taxing effect, don't need to dwell on that. Utopia Sprawl and Wild Growth, these are for Earthcraft, because Earthcraft says tap and untap creature control, untap basic land. So essentially you can tap this for 2, and essentially it just gives you a bit of an extra effect from Earthcraft in that respect. So really great cards generally, but when you get to use Earthcraft to continuously untap it, it really adds up quickly. Earthcraft, as we mentioned, Cryptolith Rite, as we mentioned, these cards are very similar but very different at the same time. So Cryptolith Rite, obviously great because all of your creatures get that tap effect, but Earthcraft is a whole turn faster because it doesn't need haste. You can do it on any creature because it taps the creature doesn't tap itself. We can use it, we can pair it with Squirrel's Nest, which is another squirrel token generator. So we tap it, create a 1/1 green squirrel token. If we have our commander out, we create 2 squirrel tokens. We can use those 2 squirrel tokens to tap and untap that squirrel nested land twice. So essentially it's already an infinite without the doubling, but it's effectively an infinite plus in terms of creatures. So it's infinite mana and infinite creatures with the doublers out. We've got Ominous Seas. This is a combo with Greater Good. So essentially we can draw a card and put a Foreshadow counter on Ominous Seas, remove 8 counters from Ominous Seas, create an 8/8 blue Kraken. We use the 8/8 blue Kraken, we sacrifice it, we draw 8 cards, and then discard 3. Because we've drawn 8 cards, we can then put 8 counters on the Ominous Seas, and we can use that to repeat this process and draw a whole deck if we would like to. And so these 2 cards together, we can then go and cast our Concordant Crossroads after we've done everything we need to. We've got all of our creatures, our whole deck in our hand, and we basically just alpha swing for the win. Awakening Zone, so this is just a enchantment that each turn at the beginning of your upkeep, you create a colorless Eldrazi spawn creature token, which is basically a creature that's kind of like a treasure token, but it only taps colorless mana. But with a doubler, once again, it's just instead of 1, it's 2. Instead of 2, it's 4. So it's just a really sweet engine that works in this deck. Rhystic Study, another taxing effect, the same as Mystic Remora. Squirrel's Nest, we spoke about this already. From Beyond, now this is the reason for the Desolator include. So From Beyond is exactly the same as the Awakening Zone, except it's a 1/1 instead of a 0/1. And then it has an ability 0 and green, sacrifice From Beyond, search library for an Eldrazi card, reveal it and put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. So we do that and we go and find our Desolation Twin, which is obviously another great payoff for that. So if you like that combo, I'd say keep it in there. Otherwise, the From Beyond just on its own is great. Greater Good's just good card draw. Leyline of Anticipation, mostly because we are so weak to board wipes on turns where we don't think we are going to get a whole lot of action on that turn. We want to just keep things back so we can flash things in at someone else's end step or something like that. Mechanized Production, put this on an artifact that you control. At the beginning of your upkeep, create a token that's a copy of the enchanted artifact. Then if you control 8 or more artifacts with the same name as one another, you win the game. So what's pretty cool is you could create so you could flash this Mechanized Production in at an end step, and attach it to any of your actual artifacts. That then creates a copy, but if you've got a doubler, it creates 2 copies, or if you've got a tripler or a 4xer, you're going to actually win the game, you know, within 1 turn cycle of this actually being cast. So you can just get your win out of nowhere with the right board state. Okay, parallel lives. If an effect would put 1 or more tokens onto the battlefield, it puts twice that many tokens on the battlefield instead. So you just stack all these replacement effects, so it's a double and then it's a double again. So instead of 1 token, it's 2 and then 4. We've got doubling season, same thing again. It's 2, then it's 4, and then it's 8 times. And then, yeah, Primal Vigor, same thing again. All of these things work really well. Thopter Spy Network, it's just a enchantment that reads at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control an artifact, put a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying onto the battlefield, and you get to draw cards whenever an artifact creature does combat damage. The last enchantment we have for this deck is Shark Typhoon. So I mean, this card is just absolutely great in Modern and in Standard. I think it even gets a bit of Legacy play as well. So you cast a non-creature spell and create an XX blue shark creature token. So it's a token creator, but you can also cycle it for X is for X, 1 and a blue. And so you pay 5 mana, you get a 3/3 shark token that flies. But what's cool with this deck, obviously, we're making more than one of those things. Can't be countered, it can be stifled, but it can't be countered, so it's really hard to deal with. If you need to block an Alpha Strike or something like that, or lethal commander damage, this is a great way to save. Mana base wise, it's extremely basic. We've got Breeding Pool, Emergent Zone, Flooded Strand, Gaia's Cradle, Guildless Commons, Misty Rainforest, Mystic Sanctuary, Pluto Delta, Prismatic Vista, Scalding Tarn, Simic Growth Chamber, a whole bunch of snow-covered basics, Trop Island, Urza's Factory, and a few more fetches with Verdant, Windswept Heath, and Wooded Foothills. So the spicy stuff that we've got here is Gilded Commons and Simic Growth Chamber. I guess the important thing with both of these cards is they're bounce lands. So you can use them with Kodama to essentially get more and more value, because they're just absolutely great with anything that can let you sort of cheat in extra lands for free, because you get another land back, so you can use that effect again. Your fetch lands should make sense. Emergent Zone is a one-off flash, much the same as the Leyline of Anticipation. So really great card in general. I just find it to be super useful, and particularly in a deck like this. The only other thing we've got is Urza's Factory, which is another very expensive but good, I guess, artifact creature token generator. So an absolutely great card in this deck. So yeah, there's quite a few combos in the list. It's really just about going wide and creating a whole bunch of scenarios where you've got tripler, doubler, and double tripler, and just a whole bunch of exponential growth. So that every single spell, even if it's a 2-drop or a 3-drop, like a Quasi-Duplicate or something like that, you get to basically create a copy of a copy of a copy. And, you know, a 3-mana spell gives you, 80 damage worth of power on the field. So absolutely insane. I'm really looking forward to trying this deck out once the commander's actually released. I think there's probably a lot of ways that you could probably improve the deck. You could, like, the first thing that came to mind for me was something like Triumph of the Horde or anything with Infect like that. If you wanted to put a Crater Hoof, it's obviously a pretty easy win button as well. I really liked the idea of keeping the theme of just having go wide as the primary win rather than the pump. Just because I thought it sort of seems more different than just building the same sort of Simic or Simic plus X, deck that really just plays exactly the same as every other deck. Thanks so much for listening to the video. I really hope you enjoy this. The full deck list will be in the description of the video as per usual. And thanks so much for watching. Bye for now.